believe it or not, this is something where I do want to point out and see the positives in it. It's something minor. The Commissioner of Police, earlier with Christopher, she apologized to the officers after the legitimacy of some 900 promotions of constables to corporals was brought into question. And it might seem like a minor thing, right? But sometimes what's important are the obvious, are the, basic functionary duties, We're not talking no grand strategy here. We're not talking no grand PR campaign with some innovative messaging that uses 52 and a half buzzwords, new age philosophies and ideologies in order to get your ideas across. And we have innovative new constructs of extra-dimensional thinking with regards. No. Sometimes it's the basics that seem obvious that matter. And one of the things is, you have an issue, apologize. Don't over-apologize. Don't go into some long-winded thing. Don't then use it as an opportunity to redirect and put spin. Just do a basic, this has implications. I apologize for the stress involved. And then reassure why this is potentially necessary, where it will be beneficial overall, even though it might not be beneficial to some or even most of the people directly involved, but as an institution that has responsibilities to the entire nation, it can't just be about the 900 involved. And I think also, you acknowledge the adverse impacts, but it's not about, oh my gosh, we can't do this because they're going to be upset. The fact of the matter is, if the promotions were done correctly, in theory, not all 900 would have been promoted and they would have been disappointed because of that. And not everybody's going to be happy with that decision. So you can't please everybody. And I think this is one of the things that a lot of our leaders don't understand. They understand it on an intellectual level, but on an emotional level, when they have to actually face the consequences of being in the hot seat, of being in the chair, wearing the crown that everybody else wanted, whether it's Prime Minister, Commissioner of Police, there's levels to this, obviously, but at the end of the day, the basic principles remain the same. You want to be the head cheese of whatever it is in the public sector, in government, etc., or even in private business. You have to face the music. The buck stops at you, not just the authority, but also the responsibility. Don't trot out your subordinate now to have to deal with the fire and the press and the complaints and the anger. You have to face it. And to some extent, that's what the commissioner is doing here, right? Because you can't avoid it, and you can't try to placate the situation to say, well, we'll let it stand and we'll just do better next time. No, bad precedent. So to whatever extent that they're going to try to rectify the anomalies and review the promotions, I want to see that. I want to see that properly corrected, because 900 promotions in an institution that I believe only has a few thousand officers in total, to some extent that's weird, and I do wonder why isn't it. I understand the association's concern about the morale of the officers, but really and truly, is that tenable? And more, while in the past I appreciated ASP Gideon Dixon's approach of not being a combative association president. And I get that, yes, he does have to advocate for the rights of his members, so you don't want to unnecessarily give ground as a negotiation tactic, but at some point that wears thin on me. And it's just not practical, and I'm fed up of seeing union leaders trying to take every inch they could get, and sometimes every mile they could get, whereas, okay, I get it. The other side doesn't always negotiate in good faith or do things in good faith either. I get it. But you're not helping the situation, in my opinion. Not everybody could be promoted. That is just the reality of, yes, I get it. There will probably be potentially some people who deserve promotion, but if there are not enough slots, there are not enough slots. That's the whole point of meritocracy. And in that point, either your criteria is too low, or, well, your criteria is probably too low, or there's something else with regards to assessing or promoting that probably is out of whack. But for the most part, yeah, if too many officers keep passing the bar for promotion to the next level, then you do have to look at your standards, right? And that's a good problem to have, but somehow we have to be careful from turning it into a bad problem. And at the end of the day, now, what are the standards? It might not be that the standards are too low, it might be that the standards don't include enough. I want meritocracy. Does everybody want that? I want to see it because, in part, I want to see a better police service. I don't know if it's going to go that far. All right. Let's hit the last story before the break. I keep saying this is one area in the TTPS that we seem to be doing a reasonably good job, and that so far has continued. 3 minors were rescued in a human trafficking, operation, right? That was trafficking in minors and prostituting minors out. 3 adults, this is in Tobago, 3 adults, foreign nationals, 1 Colombian male, 2 Dominican Republic females, were arrested and appeared before a magistrate, charged with human trafficking offenses under the Children's Act. So there are multiple charges here, including trafficking, transporting a person for the purpose of prostitution while inciting a child to become a prostitute. And the report indicates that, they got information of an alleged child prostitution ring, minors were being held against their will, and then they proceeded to conduct intense surveillance in Tobago, had a police operation, and I assume there's enough evidence to charge the 3. That's why they were successfully taken before a magistrate. So I'm hoping to see more of this, but then the question comes, and I understand that some of these special victims cases, domestic abuse, rape, human trafficking, etc., etc. Now, the human trafficking aspect, to be fair, is to some extent caught up in corruption, right? We have allegations of that from different sources over the last couple of months and years, etc. But some of the other cases that the Special Victims Unit does, they don't have the same type of complications that murder cases have or corruption cases have. So I get that, I understand that. But I do have to wonder, what is it about the officers in these cases and in that unit and other officers that assist that unit in cases like that, that seem to be more effective and or more professional than many of their peers? And maybe Claire Lane and the Commissioner and the DCPs and the ACPs and so on and so on, maybe they are recruiting the right officers for that, for those roles, because it's a lot of those cases are sensitive issues. This one, 3 minors are victims here, right? Survivors who now have to be properly treated with respect, with empathy. I mean, they're children, essentially. So a lot could go wrong with how they're being handled that will impact their lives. So I get it, and maybe they are, and kudos to them if they are very selective in who they select and how they operate. But to some extent, more and more I'm wondering if there are certain basic things that the Special Victims Unit does, or whatever the official name is. There are certain basic things with regards to how they conduct their operations, their personnel, they select their people, they promote their people, their standard operating procedures, their practices, certain things that they do that really, if we take it down to the base, we strip away all of the detailed stuff that has to do with the specifics of the type of crime that they have to deal with, and we strip the basics down, those things should really be applied to the rest of the TTPS. At least that's how it appears. Maybe it's a great shell game, but at the end of the day, we're seeing results. Maybe it's not a lot of results, but we're seeing results. We have statistics, we have analysis, we have efforts being done, right, on multiple levels. And we don't necessarily always see it with regards to the rest of the police service and crime fighting in general. On that aspect, crime fighting is not just the TTPS. So just something I want to point out. Success, but then of course, you know, the little wrinkle is that why is the success so difficult in other areas? Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue on with the daily review here, and then we'll get into the PM's press conference. More from Talking Point after this.
Naturally to us, unstoppable energy. We use it to manifest a future. A future where energy takes new forms and is used in new ways for all of us. The new age of energy is here.
Simon's Musical Supplies Limited. We are the specialist in new and used musical instruments, carrying top brands like Yamaha, Pearl River pianos, vinyl and Sabian cymbals, Remo and Evans drumheads and Fender guitars, just to name a few. Also a wide assortment of music books, pan and accessories. At Simon's, we service what we sell. Trust the leader. Call us now at 625-6412 or visit us at 20 Board Street, Port of Spain.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. And just for you this Christmas, come check us out for great gift ideas and all your Christmas decorations. 6 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at West Mall, Pennywise Plaza Chaguanas, C3 Center Branch, Christmas Store at C3 San Fernando, and Eastgate Mall, Trin City. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Welcome back to Talking About, ladies and gentlemen. And to continue with the positive news, I always like to highlight this when I see it, and I don't see it very often, which is unfortunate. But continue on with the daily review, our 4th story today. Well, there was the Ramai Trace SMDS, SDMS, Hindu school in Delhi was finally completed and opened as a ceremony that included both the Minister of Education, Nayan Gaspidoli, and Orapuchi's MP, Dr. Rudal Munilal. And in the ceremony, they actually had good things to say about each other. Now, the Minister of Education is quoted to have said, "I want to tell him," meaning Munilal, "that this is what representation is about. It is about advocating for the needs of your communities and your constituencies." And Dr. Munilal certainly made all efforts to ensure that this project did not get stalled, and we are here today. And then Munilal is reported as saying that he thanked the minister for being extremely, and this is what he quotes start, extremely accessible and very open and affable in receiving our questions and protests. I mean, you know, you read between the lines and you basically could see, you're reminded of some of the contention over the whole issue of schools not being completed, etc., all of the rhetoric that goes back and forth, right? But at the end of the day, of course, there's pictures where they're cutting the ribbon, they're smiling. Yes, okay, you have your political jockeying at times, I get it, but still, you can come together. And in the little underlying criticisms, if you read between the lines, there is some actual praise there. You know, because to some extent, I could agree with the minister. This is what reputation is all about. This is why we need MPs. And I would then go a step further and say this is why we need our MPs to be just MPs and not ministers, right? To advocate for their constituencies and the needs of their constituencies, whether it is towards the local government bodies or towards parliament, towards the ministries, towards other state-owned companies and agencies, public utilities, etc., to be the advocate, to represent first in parliament, but then potentially in other avenues where it may be needed, because that's the job. That's Member of Parliament, XYZ, House of Representatives. And of course, ironically, Dr. Munilal is admitting that the Minister of Education was accessible and open and affable in receiving questions and protests, right? And was, and by that I would assume willing to dialogue. I mean, as far as we all understand, those slightly in the know, the politicians aren't actually that contentious in private. They do it for the camera. They do it for their voters, especially for their base. And my thing is, why? Why do we need to do that? We have examples where things could be, either we see them working together to achieve something, or we see the potential of what could be if they work together to achieve something. And like, it is a beautiful thing. You could almost reach out and touch it. But then it is just, you know, it's like the commercial where the old man has the fishing rod and the dollar on the hook, and you have to be quicker than that, but we're not fast enough because they keep yanking it away from us. And that's just our politics in a nutshell with regards to that. With regards to what it could be, it's always off in the distance. It's never realized, or at least rarely. And in this case, in a minor way, it's maybe slightly realized. Next story I want to get into before the break. We're going to take a small break and then get into the Prime Minister's press conference later. But the THA is looking to get a new airline. From what I understand, the airline will be to both do international flights as well as local flights. Now, that gets tricky because technically the THA could negotiate with airlines on the commercial aspects of it, but the airlines still need to have authorization from the Civil Aviation Authority. And then it also gets sticky with regards to if they negotiate with an airline to do the inter-island air bridge. It's a domestic flight. That is a trickier situation with regards to allowing a foreign airline to do domestic flights. One of the articles reporting on this pointed out that, look, we could do flights to American airports, but not necessarily from American airport to another American airport, thereby doing an internal flight. Those things are handled by American owned and operated airlines, not just American Airlines. And generally speaking, the airlines that operate within TNT's borders to do the domestic air bridge, we only have 2 locations, right? But still, the principle remains the same, has either been, well, it's more or less essentially been locally owned, all of them, right? I think Air Caribbean, for the most part, was local, or at least CARICOM. And it's not as though Air Jamaica or LIAT has done the air bridge. Caribbean Airlines is essentially majority TNT owned or significantly TNT owned, and of course BWI before that, Tobago Express somewhere in the middle. So it's a complex thing. At the end of the day though, as someone who said, look, we do have to understand that Carl is facing a complex situation with the air bridge. I don't have an issue with, seeing what competition could do, because then it would potentially allow more transparency in the whole situation, right? As much as I am willing to accept at least some of what Carl says on the difficulties of the situation and some of what various stakeholders and the THA and the central government say about the air bridge, when you bring in another party that is privately owned, all of a sudden, things might come out. More details on the challenges, as well as to see somebody else try their hand at it. And they might figure out a different way to do it. And maybe Carl might, be forced to adapt and improve, or maybe there isn't much room for improvement and, the participation of a competitor will prove that too, to some extent, maybe, right? At the end of the day, there's no guarantees here on what may or may not be revealed. But getting competition in, look, there's a reason why Digicel is here. We were TSET for quite some time. And then Digicel came, and then all of a sudden, things had to improve. Now, one could argue, did they really improve? But there are, of course, there's the high heights, but then there's the floor for business operations, where things might bottom out. And one could argue, our floor ain't that high. It could get low. And business operations could, get low. So even, you bring in a competitor, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to just improve things like that. It'll improve some things, and then, things will settle down into what it is. But why not? Let's see it. Let's see it. I hope that they don't have any significant hurdles to get the airline authorized for the domestic air bridge. To get a new airline to do international flights, that's par for the course. That's not... To me, that's not where the matter is. And it won't replace Carl, it will be operating alongside Carl. So the other aspect is potentially getting more capacity. That will also be something that Tobago definitely wants to see. I want to see it too. So we wait and see how this turns out. Folks, let's take a break. When we come back, Prime Minister's press conference, have some clips for you. Stay tuned to Talking Point. We'll be back after this.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
It comes naturally to us. Unstoppable energy. We use it to manifest a future. A future where energy takes new forms and is used in new ways for all of us. The new age of energy is here.
Let Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. And just for you this Christmas, come check us out for great gift ideas and all your Christmas decorations. 6 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at West Mall, Pennywise Plaza Chaguanas, C3 Center Branch, Christmas Store at C3 San Fernando, and Eastgate Mall, Trin City. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Toraman, ladies and gentlemen. So now I do want to get into the Prime Minister's press conference. Been talking about it last show and, most of the show. There was a lot that the Prime Minister had to say about the energy sector, and he started off with looking at the energy revenues and pointing out to the fact that, yes, when they speak about the non-energy sector, the manufacturing sector, that includes the petrochemical sector, in Point Lisas and all of those things, that's not technically energy, despite the fact that it does use its raw materials from petrochemicals, fossil fuels. So there is some tie-in. Whenever the Minister of Energy, of Finance says the manufacturing sector is doing well, a good chunk of it is the petrochemical sector. But the focus was on the declining energy revenues specifically, right, with regards to the various deals on fossil fuel extraction and the sale of such. And of course, one of the things that came up in the, I guess you could say, second half of the Prime Minister's presentation, it was actually pretty long, so we can't necessarily go over everything, but towards the second half, he spoke specifically about the Atlantic LNG restructuring, which in and of itself has a lot of questions. How are we benefiting? It seems like for nothing, right? Now, it is part of a larger ongoing effort by the government, and some things were answered with regards to what they've been doing for the last 7 years or so, give or take, and but some things were potentially left unanswered. So we could hear some of what they said themselves when we cue this. Oh.
That the approach that was being pursued at the time when I intervened in 2015 is that the NGC should get out of the business because the level of risk taken by the government through the NGC is too low to be profiting in the way that we're profiting by the NGC. The government of Trinidad and Tobago said, no way. We are in the business, not just as tax collectors, we are in the business as partners. And all our negotiations, that was the principle, that was the fundamental principle. And when I told this country that I'm this country's #1 salesman, that is what I was talking about. We are partners in the business, owners of the raw resource and partners in the business. As a result of that approach and getting success in that approach, when we came to deal with the demise of Train 1, you would have seen some people jumping up and down, happy to tell you Train 1 has to close down and so on. And of course, we spent $24 million US to keep Train 1 in the train business. And that was a big story in and out of the parliament, that we've wasted $24 million. What we did there was to keep Train 1 in Atlantic LNG, so that Trinidad and Tobago, we had 10% ownership. We could remain at the table and negotiate into Trains 2 and Trains 3. To do that, we had to embark upon a restructuring of the Atlantic LNG ownership shareholder structure. That's what I was all about. And I can tell you at the end, what we have signed in London on Tuesday, there's a particular $30 million to be paid. And I seem to recall when I was in primary school that 30 was more than 24. But of course, they were lying in the parliament that we had spent $400 million and the money was wasted. But we know they didn't understand what they're talking about. All those noises were coming from people who were either delinquent in dealing with this or didn't know what they were talking about. We knew what we were doing. We spent that $24 million. We kept Train 1 on the table. We then had an opportunity to be in the discussions as to what happens to Trains 2, 3, and 4. And the end result is we now have a single shareholding arrangement where even as we take Train 1 out of operation, recovering the money that we spent to be on the table, we are now in ownership, in shareholding, in Trains 2, Trains 3, and continue to own in Train 4. On top of that, we also negotiated new formulae for revenue take. We are no longer bound to a referencing to get our revenue based on Henry Hub or the Lake Charles arrangement in America, which are the lowest prices for gas, because America is awash with gas. So the price of gas at those hubs are low. But in Europe and Asia, the price is high. And of course, those who market gas, and of course you will know Shell is the largest marketer of gas in the world. Shell is our partner in the Hibiscus platform. Shell is our partner with Manatee, right? And elsewhere. So we negotiated an arrangement where revenue streams will come to us now, not from the virtually permanently low Henry Hub reference, but from a basket of market prices, high in Japan, high in Korea, high in Europe, low in the United States. When you average it out, we end up with a better revenue stream. And that is why, even as our volumes are reported to have gone down, the government reacted in this way successfully. You didn't see an equivalent collapse in the revenue in Trinidad and Tobago. So when you hear people talking about the Prime Minister's per diem and Minister Young's many trips, those are the conversations of useless idlers. They have nothing to contribute. Either they don't understand or they're just plain mischievous. These were major, major negotiations with far-reaching consequences. And I tell you something, putting on the table now, had we not been successful in these negotiations, and had we not been successful in coming up with a restructuring of Petrotrin to have Heritage service that $850 million US debt, and the Minister of Finance is still servicing another $400 million, it would have been a good chance that Trinidad and Tobago would have ended up at the IMF. But certainly, we would have ended up with a huge currency devaluation.
Train 1 engineering-wise remains because it's the first train, and you're really, to use simple language, you're tacking on the other 2, 3, and 4 to it. So we got an increased shareholding from 5.4%, which is what we own with 10 and 11, to 10%, an uplift to 10%, at no cost to the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
And that is important.
That is important. You go and price now 3 trains with a 4th train, Train 1, as a complex, even however many 20 years later, that is billions and billions of dollars of an increased shareholding.
So we increase the shareholding at no cost, but of course that's one of the big questions. And to me, that's mainly the only real question I have over this. What was done to allow this to happen? Now, there is, I believe, an editorial in The Guardian from several days ago that points to the fact that perhaps the deals made over the creation of Atlantic LNG way back in the mid-90s was not really that equitable, and to some extent the government was able to leverage both the reliability and responsibility of our commercial, I guess you could say, consistency. We're a good corporate citizen, how we treat with our business partners, as well as the fact that we have a relatively stable democracy. Yes, it might not seem like a great democracy, but compared to a lot of places in the world, we're a democratic country, right, at the end of the day. And perhaps it was just a matter of leveraging or improving the situation, addressing inequalities and getting the foreign companies, Shell and BP, to agree, listen, how it stands is not really working out, and we need to improve the situation. Now, there was also earlier in the press conference, the Prime Minister pointed to $11 billion that the government was able to collect that it would not have been able to collect if it did not do negotiations on other aspects of the energy sector. And that included a royalty. Let me just get it. It included a royalty. It also included the negotiations for the prices on which natural gas was traded. So that was natural gas deals with the NGC, as well as the fact that they prevented certain players in the sector from holding out, trying to negotiate long-term contracts when natural gas prices were low. So there was that. Now, the opposition has some interesting questions with regards to, what is the pricing formula? It was somewhat explained by the Prime Minister. The details, I think, to some extent, gets very technical. He might not even necessarily know it himself and don't necessarily matter once what he said was correct and true, and in the general sense. Potential liabilities and costs to be incurred by the new shareholding agreement. I mean, they pointed out when you get ownership, or at least in parts of the press conference, Minister Young pointed out, when you get ownership, there will be, so to say, new liabilities incurred, new costs incurred, risks incurred. But at the end of the day, those things are kind of understood. We want to benefit more, so we will have to take on a little bit more of the risk. Now, it's not as though we're taking 50% of the risk of Atlantic LNG, but we did go from 5.4 to 10% overall ownership, and took an entity which, it's interesting. Why is Train 1 important? Why is it still open? Because that's what the minister said to CNN. Even though it wasn't operating, it's still open. The infrastructure is still there to be used, right? And that's important because the other 3 trains are tacked on, because it's one complex. So one of the things is, ironically, we complain about inefficiency, but they streamlined, apparently, the operation by bringing everything under one ownership umbrella and making it easier, I believe, for the facility to operate. Because as they had separate ownership deals for each train, that's why, well, Train 1 goes down. But you still need it for the other 3 trains, essentially, I think, on a technical level, to continue operating properly. So I understand the opposition's concerns, the future revenue. I mean, yeah, you could explain that, but that's so up in the air with regards to various prices, et cetera, the market value of the new shareholding of Atlantic LNG. That also could be very technical, and depending on your philosophies on accounting, that could vary, especially with the price of natural gas as that varies. The shareholding of Atlantic LNG will also vary. But at the end of the day, it's hard not to agree with the government saying, well, 10% is more than 5.4%. And for the most part, the Prime Minister pointed to the fact that, look, even with all of the doom and gloom, we have been able to, relatively speaking, maintain the lifestyles of Trinbagonians. Now, notwithstanding the inflation in price of food, we have been able to maintain it. So, to some extent, I do have to applaud the efforts, and it makes sense. I do have to say, though, I am still curious with regards to what exactly the deal was to get, I mean, was it just altruism from BP and Shell? What exactly was that? Now, as we have a little bit of time there, there's another clip of the Minister of Energy that I want to play with regards to concerns about all of our eggs being in one basket. Let's get the Minister of Energy.
about this nonsense about the government having all its eggs in one basket and dragon.
You heard the conversation about deepwater gas. We have progressed deepwater gas. Everybody talks about that. We are already well progressed. The leadership from Woodside is meeting with me next week because I was in London with the Prime Minister, and at every stage we announce that. That's one area. We have just had a successful onshore, nearshore bid rounds where we've put it out. You're seeing for the first time under us that we're getting significant volumes of gas, molecules of gas from onshore. That is as a direct result of our work. The shallow water bid rounds have gone out. We have a lot of interest. In fact, the Prime Minister was in meetings in London this week with some other people, and they also expressed their interest, as did Petronas when they met with us, which is another new entrant and player. So there's a lot of interest taking place there as well. You've heard of significant other areas where we've worked with existing entities and we've allowed sidetrack drilling, deeper drilling of wells and these types of things. The Cabinet has given full support, allowed us to do that. That is what is keeping volumes coming. We have EOG. We have also done a lot of work with other persons like Parenco, the EOG, the Touchstone, and you're seeing volumes coming there. So all of our eggs are never in the energy sector in one basket, and this is why we continue to have these conversations, and you're seeing the direct results of that type of work.
So all of our eggs are not just based on the Dragon gas basket, which I think to some extent the Dragon is still a major part of what could be our future fortunes, at least for a short-term period in the future. However, when I look at everything that was presented, it implies that the government did take a long-term approach, and that might have been one of the things that actually gave the government leverage in its negotiations with Atlantic LNG, because they're looking at multiple different players. They're looking to, yes, we want to have a royalty. No, you can't pass the royalty on to the NGC. Yes, we want to have a higher increase in the price of gas that gas is being sold for. No, you cannot then take the low American price and then redirect the gas to Europe, etc., for more money. It was profitable for you in the past, but we can't afford to just give that up now. And to some extent, one does have to ask, if Ukraine did not happen, if we would have been able to have that final bit of leverage to get the ball moving, because the energy sector did not seem to be that encouraging in the last couple of years. And before Ukraine, the last couple of years before Ukraine, or even further, right? But as the need for fossil fuels increased with the disruption to energy trading because of that war, as well as the fact that, look, it seemed as though the government did take the long view with regards to energy. They weren't going to settle. They understood that maybe, we can't just take the deal offered to us because things are running out. So now every last drop is precious. And it could just be, yes, they weren't short-sighted in energy. But the key is in energy. And to be fair, our immediate future will always involve fossil fuels, whether it's petrochemical, energy, etc., natural gas, oil, whether refineries operating or not. But that's the long-term view in terms of energy, which is, in terms of TNT, the immediate, short, and maybe medium term. But long term for the country now, it's a different scale of time. And now we do have to ask, to what extent will they be able to transition to a more long-term view of the country where, yes, green energy and renewables is part of that, because it has to be, but what about the diversification of the economy? All of our eggs are not in the Dragon gas basket, but they are in the energy basket, and we have suffered for that. To be fair again, when they started in office in 2015, 2016, 17, 18, 19, and they had a table at the start of the press conference. You could check, it's on YouTube. You could check for the press conference. Energy revenues were low, and that impacted the economy. It's not just the amount of money that we get, but also the amount of money that then is in circulation in the economy, as well as the foreign exchange earned from these deals. All of these drive our economies in ways that we might underestimate. They're very important. That's why we had a foreign exchange situation before COVID. So I get it. These things are important. And like I said, we would have never done it without it. Right? If we want to have better tourism and agriculture and non-petrochemical manufacturing, we are going to need to leverage the money earned from the oil and gas sectors. That's fair. And it does seem like it was a lot of work, and the Prime Minister pointed out, that's why I was bouncing around all the time. That's why I was doing all this traveling that the opposition was complaining about. And there was a lot of political rhetoric about him saying they don't know what they're talking about. And I don't know to what extent that's true. He makes a case about the fact that they found a situation that to them it was not agreeable, it was not good, and it was very much conceding defeat for all intents and purposes. Maybe it was a poison pill. Hey, you won the election, enjoy. But at the end of the day, let's take the rhetoric out of it. Okay, granted, the work has to be done, you're saying it what it is, we'll take it at face value. But what comes next? Yes, there will be more energy negotiations. The Minister of Energy will have to be a part of it, and the Prime Minister might also want to / have to be a part of it. But with regards to now, let's not have all of our eggs in the energy basket, as well as crime. I do think some more attention is needed there. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we open the phone lines for you, the viewer, to speak about this and all of that I've said and things that I might not have touched on today. Stay tuned to Talk About on WSN, your content capital, the only station in the nation broadcasting in HD. We'll be right back.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments. Sal puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 38923. Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
It comes naturally to us. Unstoppable energy. We use it to manifest a future. A future where energy takes new forms and is used in new ways for all of us. The new age of energy is here.
Welcome back to Talking Point, ladies and gentlemen. Now is the time we open the phone lines. We want to hear from you, the viewer. Call in and have your say. Join the conversation. 628-4578-623-9376. You don't have to speak about the things that I spoke about. You could add to what I said, whichever topic you want to add to, or you could bring up a completely different topic. It's all up to you. That's more than fine. Of course, I especially love the times when callers call in and disagree with me because, you know, I'm not always right, and trust me, you don't want to think that you're always right, that you're the smartest person in the room, that nobody else has anything smart to say. No. That is a recipe for disaster if there ever was one. And I don't want to do that. So I want to hear from you, if you're calling, let me know what you think. In the meantime, as I wait any calls, I do want to, of course, I tried not to, but I had to admit that, you know, there was no escaping it. You know, the situation with Essequibo continues, and it seems as though that at the end of the day, there isn't necessarily much hope that talks between Venezuela and Guyana are going to settle the matter. And to be honest, I think that's fairly obvious and would have been the most likely assumption based on just how the situation reached to the stage that it reached. Because it's not like, you know, two parents arguing about child custody, right? This is not something that whose time could be split. And yes, potentially you could split the assets on the middle, but neither side has indicated that they wanted to do that. So it's important that all of our eggs are not in a dragon basket, because we have yet to necessarily answer what we will do if the situation goes too far. We don't even know what too far actually is going to look like, because we're hoping, but it's all up in the air given how crazy the situation is, what will happen. We have our first caller on the line, San Fernando. Good morning. Caller, you're on the air.
Morning, Sean.
Morning.
You know, there are two things that, if you look back at our history, that the opposition has not been good at, and that is managing the energy sector, and when they were in government, and our foreign affairs. They have failed miserably on those two things. And the PNM has always been good on those two things, and you have to commend them on that. Now, that being said, let me go to Tobago, because I've been wanting to go to Tobago for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
The situation with what we saw with the cruise ships and the cargo ferry.
Yes.
It is evident that they need a Scarborough port redevelopment. It is evident, and I am glad that the THA has been started to get the act together with respect to this, because one of the things that the finance minister talked about when he had on the budget, when he gave them 300 million for I forget what they call it, 300 million, and he said that I wish them well. That is because they did not present any documentation for what they wanted to. They want their development plan.
Mm-hmm.
Now that they have done that, now there's a case for them. Once because it's on the Prime Minister's desk, he admitted that he got it. So now there's now a space to look at the port, that Scarborough port redevelopment, because they really need that in Tobago. One other thing is that I push to have an airline.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot do a domestic run from Trinidad and Tobago with another airline unless it has international connections. I'm telling you that.
Right, yes.
Out the gate.
Yes.
However, I think if it is that they're looking at doing an airline, they are going to now see what the costs are. And I hope they don't look to the government for another subsidy for this. This is something that they want to do on their own. Then whatever they get in the budget, they need to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to see how extremely expensive it is.
Mm-hmm.
Caribbean Airlines gets away with a lot of stuff because, in terms of the fuel cost, which is one of the biggest costs, because they buy fuel, basically, most of the fuel they buy is in Trinidad, and it comes from the National Petroleum Marketing Company, which is another state entity, and we both understand state enterprise or any state enterprise not paying and just carrying the numbers on the books. So I hope I wish them well, but I hope that now they're going to see, now that they're settling down, they're going to see what these things really cost. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. Yes, that is up. I didn't want to go all into that, but you're right. Basically, if what we take, and from what we understand, there's no reason I think Carl was misleading us there. The costs are high, right? The costs are high because of these specific details and challenges. So now we will get to see, hey, how you're going to handle that, right? And maybe they do have some plans that Carl hasn't implemented. You know, maybe they might have some strategies, but at the end of the day, you're right. We don't want to see another situation where we're going to subsidize more flights, right? That should not be the point. Now, I'll say this though, there might be a world where some subsidizing will take place, at least in order to get the capacity up, right? But of course, it's similar to the fuel subsidy, like it increases with scale, right? So the bill will increase, of the subsidy will increase in order to get that capacity up, and it's not necessarily something that we want to see. To what extent central government will agree with it, may not, may, right? Of course, the next thing is, here's the other complexity of that situation. To what extent will the next THA elections keep the TPP in power and will limit the PNM as the opposition, right? Because I have heard that some people voted for the PDP this election with the intention of switching back to the PNM the next election. And I guess the implication is unless they see something spectacular, unless they see something like really solid. And I don't know if the TPP is solid enough. I have no idea what the criteria for those voters are. Now, they did a good job divesting themselves away from the PDP and Watson Duke, who, while he does have his supporters, they have people in Tobago, according to one news report, saying, hey, if he did the crime, he had to do the time. And his situation is not helped by the fact that at some level, he has controversial circumstances with extramarital relations. Let's just put that there. Because he admitted to one instance, one long-term instance himself. And of course, this crime is more than that, what he's accused of. So we have to wait and see what the trial does. But it was good that they divested themselves from such a controversial figure central to the leadership of the PDP. We do have a caller from St. Anne's. I'll get into more of what Sanfano said after this caller. Good morning, sir. You're on the air?
Good morning, Sean. I'm going to gingerly step around this because it's not an area or an industry that I'm familiar with, the oil industry, the gas industry, even though I am a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. There is one aspect of all of this deal-making that, I don't know if I want to say it bothers me, but it causes me some concern. Mm-hmm. The fact that the Prime Minister and Mr. Young are leading the charge on this rather than, as some have argued, the technocrats. I know in some of the parts of the world, like in the U.S., for example, it's not uncommon for the President himself to go hopping across the globe trying to get deals for his country. He did it recently when he fist bumped with that notorious prince in Saudi Arabia. And there's something about that which tends to attract charges or allegations of corruption. Mr. Biden himself is currently ensnared in allegations of corruption, which are yet to be proven, admittedly. And I suspect the same, I don't want to cast any aspersions because I don't know, and I began my call by saying I don't know. Mm-hmm. But having the Prime Minister, the executive, and his team being so intimately involved in these arrangements, these deals, it leads for an avenue of thought that suggests that maybe something else is going on behind those closed doors that this country may not find out about, or may find out about after the fact, which may be to the chagrin of all of us. And I wondered if, I wish you, when the contributor was here to give a comment on this, but it's something that concerns me. I don't have all the information, and part of the issue about not having all the information is that you're not given the information with which to work with. It's all secret, it's all secretive, it can be disclosed. Anything could be playing out behind those doors in the interest of Trinidad and Tobago or in the interest of personal individuals. And it just worries me a tad bit. Yeah. That's my contribution.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I think, though, the reality of the situation is this is state-owned resources, right? it wasn't the case where it's not like a state company, it wasn't just the NGC, right? And once the ministry is involved, the minister kind of has to be involved. And as
I don't deny that. I'm just saying, why are they leading the charge? Shouldn't it be the technocrats, the people with the actual experience in the industry, intimately aware of it? That's what I'm saying.
I think part of it could be the nature of what the negotiations were for.
We don't know what that is it? Do we? That's what
we know some. We know,
it's supposed to be privileged information.
We know some of what it was.
Regarding intimate company secrets and the prices, for example. We don't know that. We've been told over and over again these things are not to be disclosed for the sake of keeping the lid on the arrangements and the agreements and
yeah, because it gets complex because these companies don't just have to continue negotiations potentially with each other, potentially against each other, but also potentially with other parts of the world, with other country stakeholders, etc., etc., etc. So they don't necessarily. Basically, it doesn't seem to be a lot of room. I mean, I'll be honest. I do share similar types of concerns, but in a different way, because it seems as though BP and Shell kind of took a loss. But they kind of accepted the loss that they took on the deal because to continue the long-term arrangements for however long there's natural gas in TNT to be extracted.
Nobody accepts a loss on the books. And I'll close by saying this. Nobody accepts a loss unless there's something else in that murky water that suggests a profit down the line. And it may not be disclosed to the likes of us or even to the state negotiators.
Mm-hmm.
It might be something the company has up its sleeve that, again, we're not being exposed to because we don't know.
Well, and the thing is, the potential for the profit down the line does not have to be nefarious in this case. The obvious thing is the fact that oil and gas, fossil fuels, the stock in general rose after the Ukraine war. That's why coal is back in the German market and German production, as well as other places. So I understand your concerns, though. I get it. But I think the nature of it's a combination of the nature of the negotiations. I feel as though it was not just on a very strict commercial sense. And it's very much the government and the representatives of the people were kind of intrinsically involved. Yes, it does leave room for funny business. I can see that. I have literally nothing to say against that. But I honestly am not sure if the technocrats would have been able or would have had the, ironically, it sounds like I'm praising the Prime Minister a lot. I don't know if they would have had the same kind of motivation to get this done the way how it was done. Of course, again, I said the same thing as you. How do we gain something for nothing? So the only thing that I could think of is the fact that, look, essentially the government took the long view and they took a little bit of a gamble and it paid off, in part because of Ukraine, that, listen, this situation cannot stand. We need to do things, including put in a royalty tax on natural gas. And I think in the long run, Shell and BP said, look, it will still benefit us to take this deal as opposed to trying to maintain the status quo. And in some ways, maybe it could improve things. I'm not entirely sure for them. But I hear what you're saying, yes.
I wish we knew what they gave up.
Right. What the details of it was. What the details of it was. Because you can't get something for nothing. You can't get something like that. All right. Thank you, St. Anne's there.
Thanks.
That was a very important point that he raised. Because at the end of the day, you can't get away from the government being involved, but we've had situations like the slips in Heathrow, right? Where it's just questionable decisions and where the kickbacks came from. And the thing is, we've seen like with the Piarco case, the kickbacks don't have to be big. They could be relatively small. It could be more than affordable in TNT, but they could be there. However, the nature of these deals, I'm not as concerned. I'm just not. I understand that we should still question it. We should still try to, hold the stakeholders to account, the players involved to account. But I don't know. I'm not so concerned about it. I have different concerns, right? They're on a parallel track. San Fernando again. Morning.
Yes, Sean. The caller from St. Andrew. I have to say kudos to him. That's the important point here there. That not necessarily something that they give up, or what does the company have up their sleeve. And let me say this, as an employee of two international companies, former, because I no longer work for them, and being on the sidelines of these negotiations, let me tell you this. In small island states like ours, the executives of those companies, while the lower levels, they will have the technocrats dealing with it. When it comes down to the hardball negotiations, they want to deal with the top brass. They don't want to deal with a minister alone, Sean. They want to deal with the head honcho.
The prime minister himself.
That is how it's done.
Yeah.
That is how it's done. If you look at the African states, when they negotiate with the head of state. The head of state has to be the driver of the process.
Right.
Or else the process falls by the wayside, Sean.
Yes. You put it better than me.
I mean, I sound like a defending the prime minister.
No, I was trying to say...
But that is the reality of some of these situations.
Caller, I was trying to say that, but I think you put it across better than me, right? For better or worse, unfortunately, the Prime Minister has to drive part of the process, both for their end, the company's end, and for our own. Did we lose a call? I didn't mean to interrupt you. I don't know if you had more to say. But yes, you said it better than me, that it will fall by the wayside potentially with the bureaucrats. I mean, that's the risk, right? And yes, it does sound like we're defending the Prime Minister, but I have to admit, this is one of the more effective things if you take the rhetoric from the press conference out, because there was some there, some verbal jabs at the opposition with regards to how they did things. And San Fernando did point out, though, that in his opinion, right, and he's no friend of either party as far as I'm aware, maybe I'm wrong, the PNM just seems to be better at foreign affairs and the energy sector, and that does go in line with some of the things that the Prime Minister said. Now, okay, he made political claims, although not in Parliament, so, he made it publicly in just a press conference. Probably these things at the surface level are true, technically true. His framing of the truth could be questionable, right? To be fair to the opposition party, though, what do people say? The PNM has been in government for the majority of the independence of TNT. So for better or worse, the PNM does have a certain amount of experience, you could say, right? From the various prime ministers. Mr. Manning was there, I believe, towards the end of his predecessor, Dr. Eric Williams, I believe it was. Then, of course, they got the 33-3, and then Mr. Manning rose to prominence. And, of course, Dr. Keith Rowley was part of his cabinet at a time until the contentious backbencher situation, etc., etc. And then we reached to now, whereas the UNC has only had a couple of turns at it. Of course, the question is, was the NAR also bad at oil and gas? But with that said, it's not to discount Mr. St. Anne's point, where the lack, I have more faith in this deal just kind of based on the things that we do know, and it's not as though you could cover up things. You can't lie about we go from, we have stake in trains 2 and 3 where we didn't have before. You can't that can't be a lie, right? But my parallel concerns, and a parallel to Mr. St. Anne's, is that yes, you claim that we got it for nothing. What does that mean? To some level, it would make people be a little bit nervous with regards to the hidden things, right? And of course, the opposition will play up, and I think they're kind of being sidetracked. They want to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks once again. But the flip side to that is, it's also, when they say these things, they are sending out these messages to the international community, and it's sending different signals to various stakeholders out there, right? We have to remember that too. Not all of it is necessarily going to be straight up beneficial, right? When TNT wants to claim that they got something for nothing, of course, again, we could continue going down the analysis chart and then say, but on the flip side to that flip side, Shell and BP publicly have to, agree that the minister and the prime minister could say these things, and then they have to go to the other countries that they're negotiating with and, say, well, look, Trinidad and Tobago got this deal, what about us? And then they have to deal with that. So, You know, it's hard to believe that those two companies would have taken losses, because then the losses set precedents for other losses potentially, right? Once it's aired publicly. And they can't talk about the negotiations, but they could talk about that. They've mentioned that. That would have more or less come out at some point or the other. So, you know, you can't really keep that secret. So what is it? What was their motivation behind it? Were they being good corporate citizens? I do believe, though, that the obvious thing, like I said before, the changing nature of the global energy markets overall, I do think that's a major part. Is it enough? Is it enough? Right? I do think that things like the royalties and the price of gas negotiations and all of the other deals that the Prime Minister was negotiating from 2015 could have been what put a damper on prospective oil and gas exploration bidding and future markets. Because I think BP or Shell, I think it was BP, at one point during the pandemic, but before the Ukraine war, they were more or less kind of saying, well, we're pulling out of TNT, right? Although China and America diplomatically didn't always seem to give TNT some level of importance. And it could have been the commercial conditions or the industrial conditions for energy companies might have made TNT a little less attractive, right? Not to say that we have some hidden windfall there that we just have to discover, but a little less attractive, so they didn't want to take on any more risk. But the circumstances had changed. Remember, before COVID, oil and gas prices were down. Then after the Ukraine war, prices, you know, went back up. The economy is a fickle thing at times. And maybe without the Ukraine war, things wouldn't look so good for the government. So now we have to ask ourselves, you know, did they do the right thing? Because they got the result that they wanted, or something close to the result that they wanted, or a result close enough that they could say, look at the good job we did, but in part because of a random situation that no one could predict it. Do we praise them for that, or do we look at the process, which on some level could be flawed, the decision making with regards to the path on the journey that they're going to take, you know, because the result depended on a random situation to happen. To get to that result, do we criticize the process still, even though the result is beneficial to us? And this is why, folks, we need to be not just more involved, but more informed. And not just we read news and we listen to political rhetoric and we think we're informed, but actually utilize what we were taught in our schools with regards to critical thinking. I hope we all were. They tried to impart some on me, so I tried to exercise that. To get informed opinions when we do things like vote. Because today is a good day to have a good day, as my co-host always says, but we have to start today. We could do it if we try. And with that, we will see you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
I'm Andy Johnson, and you're watching WESN, the content capital.
My name is Carl Media, and the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Site, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m.,
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on it.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Have a content capital Christmas. It's the best time of the year. Now I know we have no snow, but Christmas is still here. Ho ho, the Christmas shows each week for all to see. Movie classics wait for you and our local content for free. Have a content capital Christmas, and in case you didn't hear, oh by golly, have a content capital Christmas this year.
The newest book is here, Closer to the Church, the debut novel by author and former mayor Louis Lee Singh. Available at all the home store branches, Barataria, West Mall, Shogunas and C3 San Fernando. Paper-based bookshop 10 Nook Avenue St. Anne's, WESN 30A Gattaca Street Woodbrook, Metropolitan Bookshop Ariapita Avenue Woodbrook, and all RIK bookstores nationwide. Available online as paperback on Amazon.com and Kindle for e-readers. For more info, call 628-5835 or 389-6504. Also available from author Louis Lee Singh, I Used to Live in Heaven, Letters to My Granddaughters, and Local Government in Trinidad, Conspiracy Against the People.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
outcome. They want to propose an alternative as well and submit it to the presidency. Once that draft is published, again, we're entering into another phase of more tense negotiations based on what's in it, if countries actually do accept what's actually been revised. If a fossil fuel phase out or a phase down does make it back into the text, that would imply actually a compromise with oil-producing countries, OPEC countries that have come under fire for really pushing hard against any notion of a fossil fuel phase out. And the problem is that it's not just those countries. India, China have also indicated quite clearly that they are not in favor of that language. So it shows you that it's, the situation is a lot more complex than just oil-producing countries versus the rest of the world. And, it was supposed to end today. It has not happened. And just to give you an indication, a press conference with U.S. Climate Envoy John Kerry was supposed to take place today, and it has been postponed by 24 hours. So it could take a long time.
Okay. Well, when and if this gets unstuck, you will be back.
I'll be
us
back.
To listen. Valerie DeKim, thank you so much. Next, the French government insisting it will still enact tough measures against illegal migration after the National Assembly rejected its flagship immigration bill. It plans to form a special parliamentary commission with the aim of returning the bill to lawmakers for a vote. Now, this bill has been a key part of President Emmanuel Macron's attempts to show he can be tougher on law and order issues, while also keeping France's doors open to foreign workers who can help the economy. For more on this story, we welcome Paul Smith to the program. He is a historian and associate professor in French and Francophone studies at the University of Nottingham. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, this came as a shock to the French government. So should we read this special commission as a compromise by Macron or a sign of surrender?
It's certainly the first, a compromise, an attempt to compromise with the Senate, but to use the Senate as a way of getting the legislation through the National Assembly. That's what it exists for, this particular form of joint committee of the Senate and the National Assembly. The advantage to the government is that it meets behind closed doors, so the exact terms of what they thrash out between the two houses will only be known at the end. But yes, it's an attempt to find a way to get the legislation through.
So what can you tell us about how this special commission is going to work exactly?
Okay, well, what will happen is there will be 7 members of the Senate, 7 members of the National Assembly representing the interests of their various assemblies. And of course, what that means is that the Senate delegation will be dominated by the right and centre right, and they'll very strongly be urging the government to go for a version of the legislation that came to the National Assembly, the version that the Senate had drafted. The National Assembly will be a bit more fractured in its approach because it will also have to represent its various different groups. And it may well be that, and we had exactly the same thing with the pensions reform, actually, that the legislation that emerges is a kind of hybrid of what the government wants and what the Senate wants, and then they will try to get that through the National Assembly. But whether that will actually work will very much depend on the attitude of Les Républicains, not so much in the Senate, but in the National Assembly.
So maybe you could just break down a few of the changes that the left-wing opposition parties that tanked this bill in the National Assembly, what are they asking for?
Well, the original legislation that Macron came up with was supposed to try to satisfy both sides. So, for example, from the left's perspective, what he was offering the left was a process of regularising the situation for illegal immigrants in France, that there would be a sort of a process by which they could get their papers in order, as it were. So that was what this kind of stretching out towards the left was. But on the right, it was making the process of dealing with migration immigrants much tougher, and also reducing the amount of assistance that they receive when they arrive in France, so health and social security, for example. So the original idea was to try to reach out to both sides from the centre. And when Macron thought that probably wouldn't work, he thought about splitting the bill, actually, and then the president of the Senate, Gérard Larcher, didn't so much veto it, but certainly said that's not going to get through the Senate. We won't have that, because he's of the Les Républicains. So Macron found himself back at square one, and that's where the objections of the left come from, that it's lost the process of regularising the situation for migrants, and from the right, of course, particularly the far right, that it's just not tough enough. But also, of course, they will vote against it because they're not going to give Macron any kind of leeway.
Now, the biggest loser in this situation is seen as Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin. Can you just explain why this was seen as such a setback for him and his agenda?
Yes, absolutely. Well, he's the Interior Minister, so it's his law to pilot through Parliament in the first instance. It's his responsibility. He's been something of a political weather vane. He's been playing to the crowd in the Senate, sort of offering inducements to say, yes, it will be a law which is all about being tough on migration. But then when he's appeared in front of the National Assembly, he's kind of gone the other way. And then this weekend, I think he very seriously misjudged the mood as well, to say that, don't worry, it's not going to get voted down. This vote of rejection, refusing to even debate the bill, it won't get through. And that kind of put people's backs up. But I think he's also tried to kind of dance to two different tunes, and the consequence of that is that he's fallen down the middle. And then, okay, they lost by 5 votes. There were 9 members of the majority who didn't turn up to vote, suggesting that they didn't want to be seen to vote for this bill because it was too tough. That's certainly the position that I've seen one of those who didn't turn up taking. So Darmanin is really under the spotlight now, and although his resignation's been rejected for the time being, if a new version of the bill, or whatever emerges from the committee, doesn't get through, then his days, I think, would be numbered.
Paul Smith from the University of Nottingham, thank you for helping break down this complicated story. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It's a critical moment for Ukraine on the battlefield, and President Volodymyr Zelensky is fighting for more military support. He's in Washington today to meet with U.S. President Joe Biden at the White House, as well as leaders in Congress. Over the nearly 2 years Ukraine has battled Russia, the U.S. has led a Western coalition that's sent billions of dollars worth of weaponry to Ukraine. But U.S. Republicans have so far refused to approve an additional $106 billion in funding, with some of them questioning whether Ukraine should even keep fighting at all. For more,
American Bradleys, HIMARS, 155 caliber artillery, ATACMS, Patriots, F-16s can get the job done in Europe. Exactly how global freedom needs it. The whole world is watching us, observing what destiny other free nation could face to live freely or to be subjugated. Ukrainians haven't given up and won't give up. We know what to do, and you can count on Ukraine, and we hope just as much to be able to count on you.
for more on the story, international affairs commentator Douglas Herbert here. Doug, we just heard from Zelensky. How likely is that message to break through in Washington?
It's going to fall on a lot of deaf ears. Look, this is essentially the last chance saloon for Zelensky. He met last time with U.S. lawmakers 3 months ago, back in September. When he did then, things were already looking very grim for Ukraine. He was running low on cash. He was running low on ammunitions. His counteroffensive, the much vaunted counteroffensive, was seen largely as stalling. He was facing very, very strengthened Russian defenses and a President Putin who wasn't going away anytime soon, going quietly into the night. Things are even more dire now. And the message he is going to be bringing, he'll first be meeting with senators. Then he's going to be meeting with the House Speaker, the Republican Mike Johnson. Then he's going to go to the White House and meet with Biden. The message in all those cases will be the same. It will be, we are facing a matter of life and death right now, on the battlefield and off, and time is of the essence. Congress is about to go into recess at the end of this week, Friday. There's not that much time to deal with it. President Biden, as you said, has requested an emergency aid package, which would include about $60 billion additional dollars for Ukraine. On top of this, say, $110 billion the U.S. has already spent over 2 years of war. The problem is, what's the problem? It's being held up by a wing of the Republican Party that is very much in thrall to the MAGA-inspired policies of Donald Trump. And what is that? It's an isolationist America First agenda, which is dictating that first priority is American border policies, border U.S.-Mexico border. So what they're basically saying is, unless you need to ties. He's demanding that Biden clamp down on the U.S. border with Mexico, or else Ukraine isn't getting any funding. Is that going to happen? Very unlikely. In fact, we've had senators, one of them explicitly say that unless we see stricter border policy, something that a lot in the Democratic Party are staunchly opposed to, there isn't going to be any aid unlocked. It's already been delayed, but nothing more unlocked. So it's a critical situation right now. The political situation couldn't be worse for a President Biden, who continues to this day to insist that he staunchly supports Ukraine and believes you need to stand with Ukraine as long as it takes.
So then what happens, Doug, if and when Zelensky comes home empty-handed?
What happens is, can Europe step in? And the easy answer is probably not. And I don't say that to be pessimistic. What I mean is there is an open letter. About 100 European lawmakers, a lot of them from Germany, from France, from Italy, have just sent an open letter to U.S. lawmakers, their counterparts in the U.S., essentially pleading for the Americans, do not pull the plug. We beg you, do not pull the plug on American aid right now. Yes, Europe has given roughly the same amount, all of Europe, as the U.S. throughout the course of this war to Ukraine. But the problem is, if the U.S. pulls out, tens of billions of dollars are no longer there for Ukraine. All bets are off. Vladimir Putin's prophecies that the West has tired of Ukraine and that he's going to win this war will essentially have come true. So right now, that's what the Europeans are desperate of. There's a European summit coming up tomorrow. They're going to be looking at aid, more aid and talks, but it's looking very bleak going in right now politically.
Huge stakes here, Doug. Thank you, Doug Herbert, for keeping your eye on this story for us. Allies of jailed Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny say they don't know where he is. For 6 days, they've been unable to locate him, and they believe he's been transferred to another facility. Navalny survived a poisoning attack in 2020, only to be sentenced to 19 years in a penal colony. The U.S. calling for Navalny to be released immediately, saying he never should have been jailed in the first place. The Kremlin says U.S. interference is unacceptable, and Navalny is guilty and serving his sentence. Important health story for you. The 37th edition of the Telethon, a charitable event here in France, which aims to shed light on rare diseases, has managed to raise some 80 million euros over the weekend. In the last 2 decades, it has played an important role in helping patients with cystic fibrosis. This is a genetic disease that mainly affects Caucasian populations. And this year alone, around 100,000 people worldwide have been diagnosed across 94 countries. But since 2021, an almost miraculous treatment is improving the lung functions of patients in a big way, and in just a few days. To discuss this health advancement, our science editor, Julia Seeger, joins us. Hi there, Julia.
Hi, Charlie.
Now, first, can you just tell us more about this genetic disease, cystic fibrosis?
Well, it is indeed a genetic disease. It's linked to a mutation of a gene called CFTR. So just to give you an idea, maybe we can look at this diagram to try to really understand what actually happens in the body when you have cystic fibrosis. What happens, Charlie, is that the respiratory pathways are protected by mucus that's going to absorb, if you will, dust and bacteria. But for this mucus to be able to be expelled, it needs to stay very fluid. The problem when you have this genetic modification is that the CFTR proteins that are supposed to be embedded in the membrane to regulate it are either not going to be there or are going to be abnormal, and that's going to lead to the mucus thickening, and therefore afterwards it's going to lead to repeated infections and also chronic inflammation. Now, cystic fibrosis is indeed known to create lung problems, but also digestive issues, which leads to important weight loss and reproductive problems. It's also, Charlie, a degenerative issue, so you're going to be born with normal lungs, and as you grow older, the lung function is going to decrease. And it's also important to understand that 40 years ago, we didn't know much about this disease. Life expectancy was of about 10 years old. Now it's about 50. And in certain countries, like here in France, they've implemented a systematic screening at birth.
Now, there is a medication that has been shown to increase life expectancy. I believe it's called Kaftrio. Is that
It
correct?
doesn't increase life expectancy yet, at least we don't know, but it's been put on the market in 2021. It's called Kaftrio. It's a triple therapy, meaning there are 3 different molecules. And it's indeed improving, at least for now, the quality of the lives of patients in a big way because it's increasing the lung capacity of those patients in just a few days. So the reason why it's so a breakthrough medication is that it's tackling not the symptoms, but the cause of this disease, which is the genetic anomaly I just told you about. Now, the treatment was authorized in 2021 for patients over 12. A year later, it was extended to patients over the age of 6. And just recently in France, 2 months ago, they decided to grant early access for babies aged 2 to 5. So that's very impressive. But the only thing, for now, at least in Europe, this molecule is only available for people who are presenting the most common gene modification, which is called, the scientific term is F508del. But that means that 15% of patients today are not eligible for the molecule. But for the other 85%, it is indeed a miraculous drug. Why? Because we're going from the situation where people have spat and coughed their whole lives. They've been on oxygen therapy, on also respiratory and nutritional assistance. They take this medication, they're going to cough for 48 to 72 hours, and then the coughing stops. Now, what's also very encouraging